Got you.
Anyways, let me introduce you. We got well, you want me to say your name or you want like an alias?
Nah, dude, you can introduce me, man.
All right. Everyone's different, but all right. We got Brian Thomas with us. I put his info in the YouTube description. So Brian Thomas.
Yes, indeed. And myself and Mark, we go way, way, way back. I would say we go back to 2009. It's been about a decade, man. It's good to
Longer
be
than
here. Glad. Thanks for having me.
yeah. I mean, it's longer than that, but anyways.
Yeah. No, no, I'm sorry. 2005. My bad. 2005.
Yeah, we
When we began high school. Yes, it
we
was.
went to high school together
Yeah, we
back
went
in
to
the
high school
day.
together. Yeah, back in the day.
Back in
So
the day.
back in the day, for sure. So man, this is a blessing to come full circle, and I appreciate you having me, man. I really love what you're doing.
Thank you, sir, and appreciate appreciate you too. I'm still I'm still kind of new to this, but I'm doing my best. But
Yep, yep.
I'm
I got
getting
you.
better every interview.
Of
But
course.
anyway, but anyways, so our topic today is relocation. So basically, I mean, what's going on is, I mean, I've been talking to people that have like moved basically like after high school to like a different state or city, and
Hmm.
like I asked them questions about like how it changed their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I mean, we could start off with like where you grew up first, and then
Hmm.
we can move on after that.
Of course. I grew up about 10 to 20 minutes outside Chicago in the west suburb called Bellwood. I went to school in another suburb pretty close to that one called, I went to a high school called St. Joseph's High School with Mark in Westchester, Illinois. All of this is pretty close to Chicago. And after spending that time in Chicago, near Chicago, I decided to move and go to school in Minnesota. So I'll stop right there. And you got any
Cool.
questions about me?
Yeah. So before we go on to Minnesota, just to like give people just like a base reference. So like, how did you like growing up in that area?
You know, I grew. That's an interesting question. It's hard to say what I really thought then because I have something to compare it to now, and
Mm-hmm.
I can say that I like where I am now more than where I grew up, just simply because um, Chicago in itself is a very working class city um, in terms of, and I'm very entrepreneur minded, and I'm all about entrepreneurship and innovation and really leveraging your gifts
Mm-hmm.
to make a business out of it, and many because of the generation gap, and along with just the kind of city that Chicago is very um is very hardworking people who go to their jobs, enjoy their jobs, and they take care of their families. So it wasn't a whole lot of room for that kind of thinking, my kind of thinking, in Chicago. And then I also I like the countryside. I like nature,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I that was one thing I realized that I really liked once I moved up to Winona, Minnesota, which was it's the land of 10,000 lakes. So I got a chance and I got exposed to that. So I would say to answer your question directly, um, I liked growing up near Chicago, but I realized that some of the things that I was looking for in a place to live were not in Chicago once I moved.
Oh, okay, I got you. I feel you.
Hmm.
So I mean, once you like in high school, once you decided you wanted to go to college
Hmm.
up in Winona. So like,
Hmm.
what about like the college or the city? like appeal to you that made you want to like actually move there?
Again, it was the nature.
The nature of
I
the.
should yeah I should say that because growing up in Chicago, it's just you see you don't get to see open countryside or rivers or lakes. You got Lake Michigan, um, excuse me, but you have mostly skyscrapers, and it's a beautiful city for architecture wise. It's
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous, man. Even revisiting now as an adult, I realize why Chicago is such a huge tourist attraction. Is because it's beautiful, architecture wise. But for me, I like things like mountainsides, or they have grass mountains they call bluffs in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically like large rolling hills. And then just seeing the Mississippi River and just being near all the lakes. And then it's not like I like fished or anything or like or hiked or anything, but it just exposed me to some, a lot different. And I found out that I liked it. It was just different, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a good kind of different for me.
That's cool. That's cool.
Hmm.
So like when you first moved there, so like what was your first impression? Like was it what you imagined it would be, or when you got there was it like kind of a shock? Like oh, I wasn't expecting this.
That's really good questions, man. These are things I don't think, thought about in this way. I can say that it was a bit of a culture shock because you realize that Chicago is pretty diverse, you know, and states like Wisconsin or Minnesota or even Indiana or Iowa, all of those states are majority white. So
Mm-hmm.
that from that standpoint, I quickly realized that you know um, where I was from was different culturally, and then it was a bit of a shock because Winona, Minnesota is a small college town. When school isn't in session between Winona State University or St. Mary's, there's only about 20,000 people in the town. But when school is in session, that number rises up to about 35, 40,000 people. So it's very much based around the universities there, and it's kind of a slow moving town. But again, man, I liked it because it was just such a stark contrast to what I was used to, you know. So I could say that culturally, it was definitely an adjustment. But I went to a high school that was a third Hispanic, a third black, and a third white. So I got a good idea of how to communicate well going to our high school. So
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't a big deal, but adjusting to the culture and the slow pace was a bit different.
Oh, okay, cool. So about how many years did you spend in Winona?
5 years total.
Okay.
I returned every summer to Chicago, but
Mm-hmm.
most of my time was spent in Winona. I spent 4 years in undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
Did a bachelor's in English and writing, and then I did a year program for a master's of teaching. So it was 5 years total,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good, man. I met people that I'm still friends with. I met who I would consider as close as brothers. In
Mm-hmm.
my last year, in my grad school year, I made some really close friends. Um, but yeah, I spent 5 years.
Okay, cool, cool.
Hmm.
So it's like when you like let's kind of take it back a little bit. So like when you first like went to school there in Minnesota.
Hmm.
So like how did your like family and friends back home like how did they like handle it? You know what I mean? Like or did they like oh I'm gonna miss you so much or like oh I'm proud of you go do your thing or was it like a mix of both?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I know for people who are watching the video, you may be wondering what this paper is behind me on my wall. It's all my goals for the year. I decided to do something different this year and just take all my goals and write them down. So if you're wondering what that is, that's what it is. But to answer your question, my I think I told my mother when I was a freshman in high school, when we were in high school,
Mm-hmm.
I told her she reminded me that I told her that when I graduated I was gonna leave and I probably wasn't gonna come back. So I guess I guess I had in my mind early on that there was just more out there for me. So it kind of I think it was just expected, you know. I was expected to go to college, you know. Praise God, you know, that I had parents to push me to that. But I don't think that there was any uh I guess a whole lot of emotion about, oh, we miss you. Of course my family was happy that, you know, when I would return for the summer or return for Christmas break or anything like that, but it wasn't anything that was overly emotional or pulling on me
Mm-hmm.
to return. When I finally did graduate, um you know, from my grad year, there was there was the assumption that I would be moving back to Chicago, but I decided to move to Minneapolis about instead of back to Chicago. So to answer your initial question, no, there wasn't a whole lot of that I can remember. There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a whole lot of you know uh, pleading with me to come back or misunderstanding or not understanding. It was real. My family was real supportive.
That's awesome to hear. It's awesome.
Hmm.
So, actually, now that you mention it, so after you said after you finished undergrad, you moved to Minneapolis. Is that correct?
Well, I spent the my last year in Winona was grad school. So
Oh, yeah.
I finished grad school in 2014 for education, and then I moved up to Minneapolis and got an apartment. I remember too. I remember I remember living in Winona and myself and a couple other friends I had made. Were about to graduate that year, and everybody was thinking, trying to figure out what they were gonna do. Some people wanted to stay in Winona. Some people wanted to move back to where they were from. But a couple of us were like, you know, we got to make this move to Minneapolis and see what we can do and see, you know, how far we can take it or make it. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember driving up one weekend with a couple friends to check out some apartments, and I actually found one. And the person that was showing it to me, they said, you know, this is gonna. It was a good deal, great deal. It was a one bedroom, like close to the city, in a great location, great apartment, and it was only like 700 a month. You know, it was a really good price. And he was like, you know, you're gonna have to put down that security deposit now in order to keep this place. But I was only up for the weekend, so it was kind of like a risk. You know, I had to do this spur of the moment, and I'm really glad I made that decision, and I put that deposit down and haven't looked back.
Wow, that's awesome. So what about? I mean, obviously, I mean most people know Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a lot bigger city than Winona. Winona, you said was only
Hmm.
like 20K.
Hmm.
So, like, when you're about to finish school, like, did you see like a lot of great like work opportunities in Minneapolis?
No, man, and that's a very good question as well. I I may not be the. I want to make sure I answer your question. I may not be the perfect candidate for that question because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, even though I had just finished getting a degree in teaching. I still wanted to do my own thing, you know. I think when you're in your early 20s, you kind of just want to do your own thing. You don't necessarily want to jump into a career. So I wasn't ready to do that, and I think there were definitely opportunities. So what I did was, um, I worked as a autism therapist at a autism center in Minneapolis, or just outside Minneapolis, and I ended up finding a really nice sweet spot, like a nice groove. It was kind of a lightweight job. It wasn't anything too serious. I didn't have to bring any work home with me. I was able to pay my bills. I was able to, kind of figure out more of what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And by the end of that year, I was ready to move again. So I guess I'll let you get to that. But yeah,
Okay, cool. So, yeah. So, can we talk about like when you decided to go to San Francisco? Because that was kind of. I mean, we
yeah,
talked about Minnesota a lot, but
yeah,
out of nowhere, it's like San Francisco comes in the picture.
right,
So,
right.
can you tell the people about like how that came about?
Of course, man. I had always had, and I think as again, I think when you're young, especially in your early 20s, you just wanna, and you finally get out of school for the first time, and you got so much energy and so many hopes and dreams and ideas of what you want your life to be like, and you want to try things, you want to do things. And one big thing for me is I had always said that I wanted to live out west at least 1 year. I was like, I gotta do it, one of these years I'm gonna, just pick up and go. Well, I didn't say that at first. Initially it was just that I need to live out of state. I spent a year in Minneapolis. I still didn't have a great idea of what I wanted to do, but that was partly because I didn't want to take on anything too serious because I wanted to move. So I didn't want to jump into a teaching job because that's a long-term commitment, and I knew I wanted to go try something else. So I started applying for jobs in like the spring of 2014 or 15, 2015. I was still living just outside Minneapolis, pretty much Minneapolis. And man, lo and behold, I was putting in apps like crazy. I was just throwing apps everywhere. Half the jobs I didn't even call back, but I was just trying to see what was out there. And one job, this one school director called me from a school in San Francisco, and he conducted a phone interview with me. And because I told him I couldn't come out there to interview. There was no way I was just gonna come on a whim, to interview. But I told him, I could do phone interview, and he liked my interview, and he liked my resume a lot, and he said he was
Hmm.
going to give me a signing bonus, to a travel bonus to relocate. Gave me 3K, and it was just an opportunity. It was too sweet to pass up, man. It was one of those things where it was like, I'm not gonna get this opportunity again. There's no way. I'm gonna get a signing bonus, gonna be able to go teach, and I'm gonna be able to relocate all the way across the country, um, and get a great salary. And I had a great salary. The only problem was, um, my lease wasn't up yet, and I had a ton of stuff in my apartment. So I contemplated back and forth and back and forth, and thankfully, again, my parents were super supportive, man. It's crazy. I look back now and I realize how much the adults in people's lives can challenge them or hinder them from doing this or that, just basically by not supporting. But my folks were just like, that's an opportunity you're never going to get. You got to go. They were a little scared for me, but I sold all my stuff on Craigslist, man. Like, I sold everything. I listed
Oh,
my
wow.
bed, I listed my couch, I listed everything that was too big to fit in my car. I had a Mazda, had a
Hmm.
2013 Mazda, and I sold everything in like the span of like 2 weeks. All on
Hmm.
Craigslist. I would just low price it so I could get rid of it and use the money to travel. I had to borrow some money from a friend. I had to borrow like 500 or $1,000 from from a friend or a couple friends just to give me a little cushion. I had money, but I needed more just in case, of emergency while traveling. And man, I packed up everything I had that I didn't sell that could fit in the car, man. Cleaned that apartment, got half the security deposit back, and I drove from Minneapolis, Minnesota to San Francisco, California, man. It took me about 2 days. And I didn't have a place to stay yet, but I had a job and I had a bonus, and I took that and I went.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
pretty crazy, man. It's looking back on it, it's nuts. Like it's nuts, but it was a good kind of nuts. I wanted to do it, man. I wanted to feel that. I needed it. When you're young, I feel like you need that. You need that sense of empowerment. I felt like I was finally doing something that I wanted to do with my life, good or bad, and I
hmm
was going to live, I was ready to live with the consequences. I was ready to take on the world in a sense. It was my first real action as an adult, and
hmm
that, I spent a year out there teaching, and it was a experience I'll never take back.
That's awesome. So,
And I
like,
saw you out there as well. Let's
oh
not
yeah,
forget that. Let's not forget that you
yeah,
relocated there as well. Okay.
that's for another
So don't
video. But
don't put that all on me. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. You
I did the same
relocated
thing.
as well. You relocated as well, man. I couldn't believe it when you told me that. I was like, wait, what? You where? I'm meeting you where? Oh
Yeah, we
man.
met at that In and Out
Oh
in
no.
Santa Clara.
Oh man, that's great minds think alike, man. That's funny, man. At the same time,
Yeah,
that's
that was crazy.
5,000 miles from home. It's crazy, man.
So, like, once you finally got over there and like got settled in, like,
Yeah.
I mean, you were there for about a year, so like,
Hmm.
in that time, so like, what were kind of like the highlights you had when you were living in California?
Well, going back to your original question about the differences from Chicago to Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
man, the difference between living in the Midwest, Minneapolis, Chicago, whatever you want to call, whatever city in one region of the country, and then moving to a completely different region. And I'm not sure if you experienced this, but the people are different. We're all human beings, so we all do some of the same things, but the way of life, the people, the way they think, the way people lead their lives, the way, just general values, just overall, the way life is, it's just much different on the West Coast. It's just a different place. And my highlights, I guess say, is my job taught me a lot. I worked with students who experienced all kinds of trauma. I worked in what they call a level 5 or a setting 5, which is high behavior kids who they're on their last chance. They have been, removed from schools. They have been through the court system. Their families are broken up in many ways. They're a step away from, they were a step away from, you know, um, early juvenile detention. And I was the teacher that was in that gap for them. So that in itself was an experience all on its own, regardless of the location that I was in. That was a experience. That's probably a different story for another day. But um, I learned that in California, people are, or I should say, in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, is not super sunny. It's about 60 degrees year round, 60 to 70 degrees year round. And I missed the seasons when I was there. I missed having winter and seeing the colors change and whatnot. I met some really interesting people, friends that I still have. You know, very intelligent people, very fun loving, life loving people. Um, you know, I had my share of downs. It was one of the first times that I was really isolated away from um, friends, people that I knew for a while. You know, people that I can call on, that I can lean on in times of distress. Or I had to learn how to make new friends, and it took me a while. You know, I didn't realize that you got to make a real effort. You got to put out an effort to make friends when you in a brand new environment. You know, you gotta do that. I learned what was for me and what's not, and I learned that California is a place that I would like to visit, maybe for a month or two at a time. But living there is something that I'm not sure I would do again. Even though I had a lot of good time, I think I just learned what I like and what I can tolerate. And I'm not sure if that answered your question, but um, I got to go see the Golden Gate Bridge. I got to see the beach every day. I got to run on the ocean every week. I got to um, go to all of these different things. The Super Bowl was there when I was in San Francisco. I got to try amazing food and go on some amazing adventures. Yeah, it's some beautiful, beautiful places that I got to see when I was there. Truly, just beautiful. Um, so those were some of the highlights. I would say it was both highlights and lowlights because I was at a point in life where I was still figuring things out. So I think it's probably easier when you're more settled in your career, when you um, know not only how to make friends but how to um, manage relationships really well. You know, I was 24 going up to 25, so it was it was a year of transition for me, for sure.
Wow, awesome, awesome. But yeah, like talking more about California. I mean, yeah, you're right. 'Cause I was in Santa Cruz. I was about for people that don't know. I mean, technically it's not in the Bay Area, but it's like 30 miles south of San Jose.
Hmm.
So I was literally Santa Cruz is literally right next to the ocean,
Right.
and like when you're talking about like the beautiful scenes and stuff, like that's for real. Like
Hmm.
especially where we come from, we did
Yes.
not see that type of stuff growing up at
No,
all.
no, we didn't. No, we did not.
Like just seeing the ocean, like some
Hmm.
days on my days off, I would just
Hmm.
go to like the beach, or so it's like 5 minutes away,
Yep.
and I would just stand in the water and like look
Yeah.
out in the ocean and be
Yeah.
like this is amazing. Like
Just
that's
amazed.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Cause we had like Lake Michigan, but
Right.
that's like nothing compared to like the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you brought that up because that was the very. I remember. I remember. So what happened was the same day that I found a place to live because I got there, man, and I didn't have a place to live yet. So I spent about 2 or 3 days. I went to the job. They gave me all my paperwork. They gave me my bonus check, my goal was to find a place to live over like 3 days. It couldn't be that hard, right? Wrong. San Francisco is the hardest place to find a place to live in the country. I'm convinced. So
Hmm.
it took me like 2 or 3 days, man. I slept in my car at least like once or twice. I would say like twice. But I finally found a place. And as I found a place, I got off the phone and I got lost. Turns out I had driven to this cliff side that was on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. It was the first time I had got lost in the right place. It was the first time I had ever seen the ocean, man, and that was just a beautiful moment for me, man. That was just it was just blissful, man, because the
Hmm.
sun was going down. It was the orange sky over the Pacific. Man, I had never seen anything so endless or beautiful or just regal in my life, man. You know what I'm talking about. You see Lake Michigan, it's cool, but it's nothing comparable to seeing the Pacific for the first time, man. It's
Nah, yeah,
yeah,
man.
man. That's just a just a
Yeah,
beautiful thing.
yeah. I remember when I first, I think the very first day I arrived in like the city I was gonna live in, I was with, well back then, but my wife now, but I mean, we weren't even dating at the time. But anyway, so like the first thing we went to was like a cliff, like you went to, like that's right by the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Then the first time seeing it, I was like shocked, like
Mm-hmm.
how blue. It's like so blue. I'm like, is this
Mm-hmm.
real? Like I only see this in like movies, but like to
Mm-hmm.
see something so blue and like clean
Mm-hmm.
is crazy because everyone like Lake Michigan is like dirty. Like,
Right, 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 right. No disrespect to Lake Michigan, man. No disrespect. It's just not. It's not the Pacific, obviously.
yeah,
No
yeah, that's
disrespect.
crazy. But I mean, yeah, we talked about like the beauty and stuff, but I mean, let's talk about I don't want to like be a downer, but the Bay Area and like California in general is one of the highest cost places to live
Mm-hmm.
in this country. So that's kind of, I mean, that's just the reality you gotta face. You can't go around it if you do choose to decide to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Like the people gotta know. Like if you're coming from Texas, Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, whatever, like it is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's real. It's like when I first went there, it was like the gas over gas like what 350. Like it's crazy compared to I was in Houston before.
Mm-hmm.
So the gas expensive. It's like the food, just buying regular groceries, trash bags.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to the store, there's no plastic bag for you when you check out. That's not there. I'd say used to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you gotta have like your own reusable bag.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the biggest cost for most people there is like rent or like a
Mm-hmm.
mortgage for a house.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's absurd. Those housing prices are crazy.
Yes,
It's
sir.
like, I mean, fortunately, I was able to. I mean, I went on Craigslist and I was able to like rent a bedroom in someone's house.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that was like the most affordable thing for me I could do because like, if you want to get your own apartment, like in Northern California, or even just like a studio,
Mm-hmm.
at the very least, might be I don't know 1,200 at the cheapest just for a studio.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want like a one bedroom, I don't know, it's like at least what 1,500 just the
Yeah.
base rent just for like a one bedroom. So I mean, it's crazy. And like the house I was living in, where I was renting, like it was a small house. Like it had like it was just one story, like two small bedrooms, had an attic where the person I was renting from lived in the attic. There's no basement or anything. There's one bathroom, like a living room, kitchen. Small house, like a little backyard. The cost of that house was like around 600,000.
Wow.
Like if you took that house and you brought it to like Texas, that house is not worth 600,000. That house is probably I don't know, maybe $100,000.
Mm.
So yeah, it's crazy. I know you were up in San Francisco, so like what was the housing prices around like approximately over there?
Yeah, the housing prices were just as high, if not higher. I couldn't even find a place in the city. I ended up settling in Daly City, which is about 20-25 minutes uh from San Francisco. But the prices were still high. I ended up finding it was a blessing. I ended up finding. I went to go see a house, um, and it was a 3 bedroom. It was about 4 bedrooms. Uh, pretty decent size, and there was one room open, and because this room had, it was a little bit more spacious. Uh, it ended up being, I want to say, what was my rent? It was 1,000. I think it was. I think my rent might have been 1,000, maybe even 1,200. I think my rent was 1,000 to rent a bedroom in this house, and it may have been more than that. And then plus utilities, splitting utilities, and then everybody used the bathroom. And then if you wanted a private bathroom, I think the rent was about 1,300. And this is just in one house, about 25 minutes outside of the city.
Hmm.
If you compare that to like living here, you can probably get that whole house. Where I'm at in Minneapolis, you can get that whole house for about 1,100 a month. As opposed to just one of the rooms. And it wasn't even a room. The crazy thing is what they do in Northern Cal, or I would guess that they do this in a lot of places where you rent out different rooms in the house, is they have a construction crew come in and they build rooms out of parts of the living room or the dining room or what used to be a living room or what used to be some of the dining room, and they'll have someone put up drywall, they'll have someone paint and completely change the structure of the house in order for them to rent out more rooms, and that happens a lot. I remember going to see some places, man, and this is actually in the city. And the crazy thing about San Francisco is that it's broken down into what they call districts,
Hmm.
and there are some poor districts, and then there are some well-off districts, extremely wealthy, like from Silicon Valley money.
Hmm.
And then there's really poor districts. And I remember, man, looking on Craigslist and going to a few places. It was literally, Mark, I kid you not. I walked into this place, dude, and this guy had this garage decked out. It was a basic 2-car garage. He had completely, completely had all the construction done to create a 3 small, tiny bedroom little apartment with like tiny bathrooms and tiny kitchen, all of this stuff, and he was charging $900 per room, and it was a 3 bedroom and a 2-car garage that he had constructed, and it was $900 per room, and that place got taken. So
Wow.
that's the crazy stuff that's going on, man. It's a lot of scams going on out there. That's why I couldn't find a place before I actually moved there because there was so many scams. I kept trying to call people and look up on Craigslist, and people were just it was just scams, man, because the
Hmm.
rent is so high. So maybe that I hope that that's some perspective for
Oh yeah,
the
that's
audience. It's crazy,
yeah. I wish I had known that beforehand.
crazy
I
stuff,
probably wouldn't have gone over there, but
crazy stuff, man. I
yeah,
saw some, yeah.
they'll make a room out of anything over there.
No, you can, man. It's crazy, and then that's not even talking about the prices in the city. Like, dude, I was friends with a couple people who had good jobs. You're talking if you're living downtown, these are small condos are 4 or 5 thousand a month. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
4, 5, 6 thousand a month, and you're paying 2,300 to live in a bedroom, just a bedroom and share a bathroom. 2,300 a month. You know, and that's not even counting. And I hate to belabor this point, but that's not even counting. You can go on Craigslist right now going and you'll see what they have called shared rooms.
That's what I
Shared
used.
room.
Yeah.
Yes, where you share a bedroom with another person, 1 bedroom, and both of you guys pay $1,100 a month each to have a shared room downtown. 1 bedroom, 2 people, $1,100 each. You're paying 2,300, $2,200 just to
Hmm.
live in a room. So it's It's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah, I think I'm glad we talked about this because this like this is stuff that's not generally like common knowledge to people on the outside.
No, it's not.
So I think like people that watch this after hearing all these stories, I mean, I'm not trying to discourage people to
Right.
like. I mean, if you got like a six-figure job, like by all
Mhm.
means, like you'll be fine. But let's say if you don't really have a job, or if the job, is not that high paying, like I think it's just a good cautionary tale for people to know ahead of time. So
Yes.
as a I don't want someone to just go out there blindly and
Right.
then they learn all this the hard way, and they're already out there and they already like made their decision. So.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, man. The advice, I'm not sure if any listeners are, asking for it or not, but the advice that I would give is make sure that you have a job in hand that's going to at least pay you at the minimum 65K minimum, 65. You got at least $5,000 in the bank before you go out there, or a bonus or whatever may have you that's going to give you that amount of money, um, and that you know what you're going there for. Have a purpose and a plan, because it's very easy to get swept up in living on the West Coast, and just because it's every day every day is sunny, the beach is always there, it's always something to do. It's plenty of things to get into. So definitely have a plan, have that money in place, and have a decent paying job. Most people say six figures. Yeah, you can, but not everybody's gonna make six figures. I survived off of about 60K,
Mhm.
65, and I was able to live. I had a car payment, rental payment, and utilities, and a couple other bills that I was able to pay. And I was
Mhm.
I was decent. I was living somewhat comfortably. So
Mhm.
that's my advice.
That's what's up. Yeah. I also want to note that California, they have like one of the highest like income taxes as well.
Mm,
So like, let's say someone you get a job offer for X amount dollars, whether it's hourly or salary.
mm-hmm,
Just know like I was coming from Texas, so Texas there is no state income tax.
mm-hmm,
You're pretty much taxes are very low in your check. They're not taking much money out
mm-hmm,
of your check in Texas, just the Social Security, Medicare, and federal tax. That's it.
mm-hmm.
But when you get to California, there's about four or five more tax categories that are being taken out of your check.
Mm, I
You
didn't know
got
that.
you got to pay, I guess whatever the city tax, the state tax,
Right.
and then there's some other like some some other taxes for some social programs. But yeah, your taxes will be a lot higher than, let's say, if you're coming from, of course, Texas, Florida, or even like Illinois. Like,
Right.
so for the people out there thinking about, going to California, I mean, yes, the wages are higher just because of the cost of living there. But what most employers are not going to tell you is, especially from out of state, they're not going to mention that, yeah, we may pay you higher than your last job, but the state and the city, county, whatever, they're going to take out, you're going to get more, but the taxes is going to be, you're going to get more taken out as well per check too. So I just want the people to be aware of that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, let's kind of shift gears. So we talked about California a lot. So,
Mm-hmm.
can you speak on? You were there for a year. So, what? what brought you back to Minnesota?
Um, well, ultimately, I I accomplished the goal. I wanted to move somewhere, relocate, preferably out west, and see what it was like. Live, embrace the culture, and enjoy that time. And I did that. At the end of the year, I evaluated things and I decided, this was nice, but it wasn't ideal. It was a good experience, but it wasn't anything that I was gonna invest more time into. It was just enough time to get that experience and do all the things I wanted to do. So I was happy with heading back and having a better understanding of my career path and some things I wanted to do. I had started up a company called Remember Me, and I had also founded a publishing company as well, since I had been publishing books, started publishing books in college. So a couple of things brought me back. Family, of course. Um, just wanting to reconnect and make sure I established. I had my brother had a couple sons. Well, yeah, had a son, and then he had another son after getting married a few years back, and I just had the it just things all kind of came together where I wanted to be closer to home, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was able to do that, and now, oh, and in the meantime, while I was in California, I started a doctorate program
Mm-hmm.
for education, and was able to keep going with that, and I'm in my final class. Got one more class to take, so a couple things happened. Like I said, it was a transition year, and I think that I was able to successfully transition um, to relocating to coming back and you know figuring things out. So that's pretty much what led up to it. Um, what can I say? That's about it. Yeah, that's that is about it.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So, this is your second stint in Minnesota. So, like, which do you like? Which stint do you like better? I guess, for lack of a better way to say it. Like, was it
Yeah.
awesome like your first time, or how is it better now? Or
Well, I think things get better with age because you got more awareness. You know more about yourself. You
mm-hmm.
know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. It's just better. You got a better understanding of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say definitely this stint. Because I'm more intentional with what I'm trying to do. Like I said, I got my goals up here, so
Mm-hmm.
it's it's execution time in terms of these goals and different things. Um, yeah, man, it's. I would say that this stint is more meaningful. The first stint was the unknown. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important for a young person, especially someone with a inquisitive mind like I have, to get that out of their system. You got to get that curiosity out of your system. Otherwise, you're kind of gonna always be wondering. And I really believe that one of the worst things that you could have in life is regret.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing I didn't want. So I would say that this stint is far better. I know what I'm looking for. I have a good idea of how to get there. It's just more about the day to day actions and taking the right steps, finishing school, and getting some more career experience, growing the business ventures that I have, and continuing to grow, man. Continuing to develop, be a
That's what's
better
up.
version of myself.
That's what's up. So, I mean, obviously you're at where you're at now. So, Like, do you see yourself there, like, for many years to come, or are you like more open to, I guess, venturing out to another state?
That's a good question, man. I may want to go out of the country the next time. If I was to do it again, I would
Hmm.
want to go relocate out of the country.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like, do you have any like idea like what countries?
I've thought about Japan, potentially. I've also thought about Egypt or
Oh, oh,
one of the Western European countries like Italy or Spain, something like that. It'd be one of those four or five I've thought about. Um, you know, I have a cousin that's a professor in Japan. He's been a professor in Japan for like 30 years.
oh, wow.
So there's definitely that option to go out there and kind of sit under him, learn more. Um, but I don't know. It depends on how things develop, and I do want to start a family some point soon here. So
Hmm.
if I'm gonna do something, it's gonna have to be in the next couple years. Only probably got. I would like to be somewhat young when my kids are growing up. So
Hmm.
I'm 28 now. Got about 2-3 years left of getting some things, checking some things off the bucket list individually. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. That's cool. So, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up soon. We've been on for a while, but
Yep.
so I'm gonna, ask this on behalf of, all the listeners. So, like, what would be like the single, like, best piece of advice you could, give a young person? Let's say, they got all the resources and tools to relocate somewhere, but for whatever reason, maybe mentally or emotionally, they're like, reluctant or kind of second guessing themselves from making that jump. So what would you tell them to kind of, I guess, give them another perspective or just motivate them to just to take that step?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. Thank you. I would say the first thing you want to do is you want to get your thoughts out of your mind and onto some paper, or onto your phone or your computer, wherever you do your best writing, um, whatever you prefer, and weigh the pros and cons. I'm a big believer in you make decisions based on what are the pros and cons of it. If you make an emotional decision, usually it's when you're relocating, it's going to be based out of fear, and you're gonna always be wondering. So first, write the pros and cons of staying and the pros and cons of going wherever you're talking about going, and you can do this for multiple places. You can do pros and cons of San Francisco versus Minneapolis versus Chicago versus. You do pros and cons for each, and then you take a trip there. You take a trip, plan a trip to go and visit. And go by yourself. I would say go by yourself, because if you go with friends, you're gonna be influenced by that experience, and you're gonna that's gonna rub off in how you perceive your own experience. So go by yourself and just do random things. Go to some of the places, see what the food is like, see what the culture like. Talk to some people. Ask some questions about what they like. Um, Chances are you're gonna meet somebody who's moved there, especially if you're going to one of the major transplant cities like Denver or Houston or anywhere in California, or you know
Hmm.
any major city. You can ask somebody. So I would say those three things. That's the advice that I would give. Don't make a fear-based decision. Um, Block out the noise. You know, especially if you got family members or if you got friends that are putting fear or putting doubt into your heart, and just make a personal decision, because you're the only person that's got to live with that decision, you know.
Mhm.
And it's nothing worse. I'll say it again. It's nothing worse than regret, especially regret of something that you could have done, you were close to doing, and you thought that you should have done and you didn't, um, because chances, opportunities, and windows close. So
Mm.
I would say by all means take that leap if the pros outweigh the cons, and even
Mhm.
if it's scary, if it's worth it, it's not easy, and if it's easy, it's not worth it.
Wow, that was awesome. It was a great way to wrap it up. Awesome, but
Definitely, man.
yeah, I gotta wrap this up now. My wife needs to go to bed, but just be keeping it 100 with listeners.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
funny,
no,
man.
I got work in the morning too, but
Tell her I said hello.
yeah, I will for sure.
All right,
But
man.
thank you so much for joining us. I mean,
Definitely, man.
this was an awesome interview.
I'm
Great,
glad.
great gems. Awesome.
Definitely.
But,
Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate you. And we go way, 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 way back. And
oh yeah.
you're my brother, so I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and for everyone listening, thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
All
All
right.
right. I'm gonna stop the broadcast.
All right.
All right.